Alright. Rain's Hand, Book 4 of 2920. The Last Year, the First Era by Karlovac Downway. Oh, yes. 3 Rain's Hand, 2920, Cold Harbor, Oblivion. Oh shit, who's writing out of Oblivion? Sothasil proceeded as quickly as he could through the blackened halls of the palace, half submerged in brackish water. Yeah. All around him, nasty, gelatinous creatures scurried into the reeds. Bursts of white fire lit up the arches of the hall before disappearing, and smells assaulted him. Rancid death one moment, sweet flowered perfume the next. Several times he had visited the Daedra Princess in their oblivion, but every time something different awaited him. He knew his purpose and refused to be distracted. Ooh, I wonder what his purpose is. 8 of the more prominent Daedra princes were awaiting him in the half-melted domed room. Azura, Prince of the Dusk, and Dawn, Boethia, Prince of Plots. Hermamora, Daedra of Knowledge. Her sign the Hunter. Malakat, the God of Curses. Myrunus Dagon, Prince of Disaster. Molag Bal, Prince of Rage, and Sheogorath, the Mad One. He's my favorite. Above them, the sky cast tormented shadows upon the meeting. Wow, what the fuck are they meeting about? That's interesting. 5 Rain's Hand, 2920, the Isle of Artaeum, Somerset. Sothasil's voice cried out, echoing from the cave, "Move the rock!" Immediately, the initiates obeyed, rolling aside the great boulder that blocked the entrance to the dreaming cavern. Sothasil emerged, his face smeared with ash, weary. He felt he had been away for months, years, but only a few days had just transpired. Lalatha took his arm to help him walk, but he refused her help with a kind smile and shake of his head. "Were you successful?" she asked. The Daedra princes I spoke with have agreed to our terms," he said flatly. Disasters such as befell Gilverdale should be averted. Only through certain intermediaries, such as witches or sorcerers, will they answer the call of man and Myr. "And what did you promise them in return?" asked the Nord boy Wellig. "The deals we make with Daedra," said Sothasil, continuing on to Lachesis' palace to meet with the master of the Psijic Order, "should not be discussed with the innocent." Oh shit. 8 Rain's Hand, 2920, the Imperial City, Cyrodiil. A storm belighted the windows of the prince's bedchamber, bringing a smell of moist air to mix with the censers filled with burning incense and herbs. "A letter has arrived from the Empress, your mother," said the courier, anxiously inquiring after your health. "What frightened parents I have," laughed Prince Juliak from his bed. "It is only natural for a mother to worry," said Sovereign Shorak, the potentate's son. "There is everything unnatural about my family, Akavir. My exiled mother fears that my father will imagine me of being a traitor, covetous of the crown, and it is having me poisoned." The prince sank back into his pillow, annoyed. "The Emperor has insisted on me having a taster for all my meals as he does." "There are many plots," agreed the Akavir. "You have been abed for nearly 3 weeks with every healer in the Empire shuffling through like a slow ballroom dance. At least all can see that you're getting stronger. Strong enough to lead the vanguard against Morrowind soon, I hope," said Juliak. 11 Rain's Hand, 2920, the Isle of Artaeum, Somerset. The initiates stood quietly in a row along the Arbor Logea, watching the long, deep, marble-lined trench ahead of them flash with fire. The air above it vibrated with the waves of heat, though each student kept his or her face sturdy and motionless as a true Psijic should. Their terror was nearly as palpable as the heat. Sothasil closed his eyes and uttered the charm of fire resistance. Slowly he walked across the basin of leaping flames, climbing to the other side unscathed. Fire resistance doesn't mean immune to fire, it just means less damage to fire, unless he has 100% fire resistance. I don't know. Not even his white robe had been burned. "The charm is intensified by the energy you bring to it, by your own skills, just as all spells are," he said. "Your imagination and your willpower are the keys." "There is no need for a spell to give you a resistance to air or a resistance to flowers, and after you cast the charm you must forget there is even a need for a spell to give you resistance to fire. Do not confuse what I am saying. Resistance is not about ignoring the fire's reality. You will feel the substance of the flame, the texture of it, its hunger, and even the heat of it, but you will know that it will not hurt or injure you. The students nodded, and one by one they cast the spell and made the walk through the fire. Some even went so far as to bend over and scoop a handful of fire and feed it air, so it expanded like a bubble and melted through their fingers. It's fucking sick. Sothasil smiled. They were fighting their fear admirably. The chief proctor, Thargalith, came running from the arbor arches. Sothasil! Amalexia has arrived on Artaeum. Lachus told me to fetch you. Sothasil turned to Thargalith for only a moment, but he knew instantly from the screams what had transpired. The Nord lad Wellig had not cast the spell properly and was burning. The smell of scorched hair and flesh panicked the other students who were struggling to get out of the basin, pulling him with them, but the incline was too steep away from the entry points. With a wave of his hand, Sothasil extinguished the flame. Wellig and several other students were burned, but not badly. The sorcerer cast a healing spell on them before turning back to Thorgalith. You'll be fine. I'll be with you in a moment and give Amalexia the time to shake the road dust from her train. Sothasil turned back to the students, his voice flat. Fear does not break spells, but doubt and incompetence are the great enemies of any spellcaster. Master Wellig, you will pack your bags. I'll arrange for a boat to bring you to the mainland tomorrow morning. The sorcerer found Amalexia and Lachus in the study, drinking hot tea and laughing. I wondered why you left Erzulia. I was like, is my gentleman's story not good enough? She was more beautiful than he had remembered, though he had never before seen her so disheveled, wrapped in a blanket, dangling her damp, long black tresses before the fire too dry. At Sothasil's approach, she leapt to her feet and embraced him. What happened? You got sidetracked. Fucking god damn it. Did you swim all the way from Morrowind? He smiled. It's pouring rain from Skywatch down to the coast, she explained, returning his smile. Only a half a league away, and it never rains here, said Lechus proudly. Of course, I sometimes miss the excitement of Somerset, and sometimes even the mainland itself. Still, I'm always very impressed by anyone out there who gets anything accomplished. It is a world of distractions. Speaking of distractions, what's all this I hear about war? You mean the one that's been bloodying the continent for the last 80 years, master? Asked Sothasil, amused. I suppose that's the one I mean, said Lachesis, with a shrug off his shoulders. How is that war going? Well, we lose it, unless I convince Sothasil to leave Artaeum, we will lose it, unless I convince Sothasil to leave Artaeum, said Amalexia, losing her smile. She had meant to wait and talk to her friend in private, but the old Altmer gave her courage to press on. I have had visions. I know it to be true. Sothasil was silent for a moment, and then looked at Lachesis. I must return to Morrowind. Knowing you, if you must do something, you will, sighed the old master. The Sigic's way is not to be distracted. Wars are fought, empires rise and fall. You must go, and so must we. What do you mean, Lachesis? You're leaving the island? No, the island will be leaving the sea, said Lachesis, his voice taking a dreamy quality. So this is before Skyrim, when the Sigics took off. This is like 100 years before Skyrim. In a few years, the mists will move over Artaeum, and we will be gone. We are counselors by nature, and there are too many counselors in Tamriel as it is. No, we will go, and return when the land needs us again, perhaps in another age. Or in 100 years, at least to pick up a big ball. The old Altmer struggles to his feet, and drained the last sip of his drink before leaving. Sothasil and Amalexia alone. Don't miss the last boat. The year continues in Second Seed. I want to read another one. We've got time. We still got about 10 minutes. Basically, Funzy, we're starting to catch up with the damn story here. Pay attention. Alright. Oh, speech increased. Second Seed, Book 5 of 2920. The last year of the First Era. Is that just ironic that our speech just increased after reading a story? By Karlovac Townway. The 10th of 2nd Seed 2920, the Imperial City, Cyrodiil. Your Imperial Majesty, said the potentate Versailles, opening the door to his chamber with a smile. I have not seen you lately. I thought perhaps you were indisposed with the lovely Regia. She's taking the baths at the Mer Korup, the Emperor, Hermann III said miserably. Please come in. I've reached the stage where I can only trust 3 people. You, my son, the prince, and Regia, said the Emperor potentially. No, speech increased because this was a speech skill book, not because we read a book. This just happened to be a skill book for speech. My entire council is nothing but a pack of spies. But it should. There should be a mod for reading books to increase speech. That would make sense. What seems to be the matter, Your Imperial Majesty? Asked the potentate Versailles sympathetically, drawing close the thick curtain in his chamber. Instantly, all sound outside the room was extinguished, echoing footsteps in the marble halls and birds in the springtide gardens. I've discovered that a notorious prisoner, an Orma tribeswoman from Blackmarsh called Kachthika, was with the army at Caer Suvio, while we were in camp there when my son was poisoned, before the battle and at Bodrum. I'm sure she would have preferred to kill me, but the opportunity didn't present itself, the Emperor fumed. The council suggests that we need evidence of her involvement before we prosecute. Of course they would, said the potentate thoughtfully, particularly if one or more of them was in on the plot. I have a thought, Your Imperial Majesty. Yes, said Riemann impatiently. Out with it! Tell the council you're dropping the matter, and I will send out the guard to track this Kachthika down and follow her. We will see who her friends are and perhaps get an idea of the scope of this plot on Your Imperial Majesty's life. Yes, said Riemann with a satisfied frown. That's a capital plan. Capital! This Riemann is a gentleman. Maybe. We will track this scheme to whoever it leads to. Decidedly, Your Imperial Majesty, smiled the potentate, parting the curtain to the Emperor could leave, so the Emperor could leave. Who thinks the fucking potentate's the real fucking schemer here? He's the one that's actually doing everything to the Emperor. He's the real traitor. I think so. Maybe. In the hallway outside was Versailles' son, Savarine Chorak. The boy bowed to the Emperor before entering the potentate's chamber. Are you in trouble, father? Whispered the Akaviri lad. I heard the Emperor found out what's her name, the poisoner. The great art of speechcraft, my boy, said Versailles to his son, is to tell them what they want to hear in a way that gets them to do what you want them to do. I need to get a letter to Kachthika and make certain that she understands that if she does not follow instructions perfectly, she is risking her own life more than ours. Ta-da! Fucking guessed it. He does sound like a real douche. 13 2nd Seed 2920, Mir Corrupt Cyrodiil. Regia sank luxuriantly into the burbling hot spring, feeling her skin tingle like it was being rubbed by millions of little stones. The rock shelf over her bed sheltered her from the misting rain, but let all the sunshine in. Rock shelter? Streaming in layers through the branches of the trees. It was an idyllic moment in an idyllic life, and when she was finished she knew that her beauty would be entirely restored. The only thing she needed was a drink of water. The bath itself, while wonderfully fragrant, tasted always of chalk. Well, no shit, it's a bath. You don't drink the bath water. Water, she cried to her servants. Water, please. A gaunt woman with rags tied over her eyes ran to her side and dropped a goatskin of water. They don't have fucking goblets. Whatever. Regia was about to laugh at the woman's prudery. She herself was not ashamed of her naked body, but then she noticed through a crease in the rags that the old woman had no eyes at all. She was like one of those Orma tribeswomen Regia had heard about, but never met. Oh shit. Born without eyes, they were masters of their own senses. The Lord of Mir Corrupt hired very exotic servants, she thought to herself. In a moment the woman was gone and forgotten. Regia found it very hard to concentrate on anything but the sun and the water. She opened the cork, but the liquid within had a strange metallic smell to it. Suddenly she was aware that she was not alone. I knew it. Lady Regia, said the captain of the Imperial Guard. You are, I see, acquainted with Kachthika? I've never heard of her, stammered Regia before becoming indignant. What are you doing here? This body is not for your leering eyes. Never heard of her. When we saw her with you not a minute ago, said the captain, picking up the goatskin and smelling it. Brought you nervous ichor, did she? To poison the Emperor with? What the fuck's she getting set up, dude? Captain, said one of the guards, running up to him quickly. We cannot find the Argonian. It is as if she disappeared into the woods. Yes, they're good at that, said the captain. No matter, though. We've got her contact at court. That should please His Imperial Majesty. Seize her. Ah, bullshit. Why is the mistress always the one get fucking framed? Waste of a woman. As the guards pulled the writhed, naked woman from the pool, she screamed, I'm innocent. I don't know what this is all about. What the fuck? But I've done nothing. The Emperor will have your heads for this. Yes, I imagine he will, smiled the captain, if he trusts you. 21 Second Seed, 2920 Gideon Blackmarsh. The Sow and Vulture Tavern was the sort of out-of-the-way place that Zook favored. Because it's the mistress' job to be fucked, I suppose. For these sorts of interviews. Besides himself and his companion, there were only a couple of old sea dogs in the shadowy room, and they were more unconscious from drink than aware. The grime of the unwashed floor was something you felt rather than saw. Copious dust hung in the air and moving in the sparse rays of dying sunlight. If you have experience in heavy combat, asked Zook, the reward is good for this assignment, but the risks are great as well. Certainly I have combat experience, relied Miramore haughtily. I was at the Battle of Bodrum just 2 months ago. If you do your part and get the Emperor to ride through Doza Pass, with a minimal escort on the day of the time we've discussed, I'll do my part. Just to be certain that he's not traveling in disguise. I'm not going to slaughter every caravan that passes through in hopes that it contains Emperor Iman. Zook smiled and Miramore looked at himself in the Kothringi's reflective face. He liked the way he looked, the consummate, confided professional. Agreed, said Zook, and then you shall have the rest of your gold. Zook placed the large chest onto the table between them. He stood up. Wait a few minutes before leaving, said Zook. I don't want you following me. Your employers wish to maintain their anonymity if by chance you are caught and tortured. Fine by me, said Miramir, ordering more grog. The grog. Why isn't there grog in Skyrim? It just explained it. Zook rode his mount through the camped labyrinth streets of Gideon, and both he and his horse were happy to pass through the gates into the country. The main road to Castle Geovis was flooded, as it was every year in springtide, but Zook knew a shorter way over the hills. Riding fast under the trees drooping with moss and treacherous slime-coated rocks, he arrived at the castle gates in 2 hours' time. He wasted no time in climbing to Tavia's cell at the top of the highest tower. What did you think of him? Asked the Empress. He's a fool, replied Zook, but that's what we want for this sort of assignment. 32nd Seed, 2920, Thurzo Fortress in Cyrodiil. Riza screamed and screamed and screamed. Within her cell, her only audience was the giant gray stones, crusted with moss but still sturdy. The guards outside were deaf to her, as they were deaf to all prisoners. The Emperor, miles away in the Imperial City, had likewise been deaf to her cries of innocence. Nominamity, though. She screamed, knowing well that no one would likely hear her ever again. 31 Second Seed, 2920, Kavas, Rim Pass, Cyrodiil. It had been days, weeks since Durala had seen another human face, Cyrodiil or Dunmer. As she trod the road, she thought to herself how strange it was that such an uninhabited place as Cyrodiil had become the imperial province seat of an empire. Even the Bosmer and Valenwood must have more populated forests than this Heartland would. She thought back. Was it a month ago, too, when she crossed the border from Morrowind into Cyrodiil? It had been much colder then, but other than that, she had no sense of time. The guards had been brusque. The guards had been brusque, but as she was carrying, no weaponry, they elected to let her through. Since then, she had seen a few caravans, even shared a meal with some adventurers camping for the night, but met no one who would give her a ride to a town. Torella stripped off her shawl and dragged it behind her. For a moment, she thought she'd heard someone behind her and spun around. No one was there. Just a bird perched on a branch, making a sound like laughter. She walked on and then stopped. Something was happening. The child had been kicking in her belly for some time now, but this was a different kind of spasm. With a groan, she lurched over to the side of the path, collapsing into the grass. Her child was coming. She lay on her back and pushed, but she could barely see with her tears of pain and frustration. How had it come to this, giving birth in the wilderness, all by herself, to a child whose father was the Duke of Mournhold? Her scream of rage and agony shook the birds from the trees. The bird that had been laughing at her earlier flew down to the road. She blinked, and the bird was gone, and in its place, a naked elf-man stood. Where is this going? Not as dark as a Dunmer, but not as pale as the Altmer. She knew it at once. It was an Aelid, a wild elf. Torella screamed, but the man held her down. After a few minutes of struggle, she felt a release, and then fainted away. When she awoke, it was to the sound of a baby crying. That's a kind guy. Helped her through it. The child had been cleaned and was lying by her side. Torella picked up her baby girl, and for the first time that year, felt tears of happiness stream down her face. She whispered to the trees, "Thank you," and began walking with her babe in her arms down the road to the west. The year